Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Donald Bielen. Hi, Don.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm excited about our conversation today because we're going to talk about planning, which is something I really like to do. As you know, I'm all about processes and for me, planning is a key ingredient to actually have a process on how to get from point A to point B, right?
Well said. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Without a process, we probably wouldn't get a lot done.
That's right. And I'm going to explain what kind of planning and give you the bio. I mean, I'm definitely going to introduce you and so our listeners know who you are. But first of all, I would love to give a shout out to Julie Marquis for introducing us. So thank you, Julie. And I interviewed Julie. It was a great episode where she actually walked us step by step on how to run a very, very effective meeting. So Julie is an EOS implementer, and I'm going to include her episode again in the show notes so people can check it out. She is amazing at what she does. So thank you, Julie. Yep. All right, Don. So you are a seasoned expert in business transition and succession planning with over 25 years of experience with working with business owners all over the United States. And you have an MBA, you're a certified financial planner, and you are also a licensed investment banker. So you definitely know what you're talking about. You have the experience and you have the credentials, and you pride yourself with your ability in terms of like you are able to work with other trusted advisors, with other professionals in order to really see what is best for the business owner and create that full plan and full picture. Okay. And we should say that you work, your company is Perkins & Co. in Portland, Oregon, but you are based in Idaho right now.
Yes.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit, is there anything else that you want to add about yourself, about Perkins, any other information that we should know before we jump into our topic today?
Well, one thing about Perkins & Company, the reason why I chose to work for this company is Perkins has been recognized as the best place to work for in actually the Portland marketplace, and actually one of the leading accounting firms for over 10 years. It's been recognized as being a very high quality, high service, very reliable accounting firm with a multitude of services. So I was asked to join Perkins about 7 years ago to expand the relationships that we have with clients. And Perkins predominantly focuses on successful business owners, and in my opinion, has the who's who of business owners within the Pacific Northwest as clients. So I'm very proud and pleased to have the opportunity to work with the people and the expertise that comes out of Perkins & Company.
Absolutely. And you and I met, I heard you give a great seminar workshop to EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, to the Portland chapter, and you did a fantastic job. You were talking about estate planning and definitely very, very knowledgeable. So I'm very excited to have you on the podcast because I wanted to talk about planning. We talk about estate planning, financial planning, succession planning, exit planning, right? And it's very obvious that entrepreneurs, from my experience, we tend to procrastinate or put it off, or we're so busy in our day-to-day, in our businesses, et cetera. And we said, okay, well, we'll get to it one day, right? So from your experience of working with successful entrepreneurs, as you said, the who's and who's of the market, and also from your experience before working at Perkins, like why business owners procrastinate?
Yeah, great question. It's interesting because one thing, an underlying factor that I've seen with business owners and actually growing up in a family business is that it becomes their identity. Most business owners start with little or nothing. They do what you call bootstrapping it. So basically taking all of their possessions, their earnings, and reinvesting it into the business to grow into something that is meaningful. It has a significant position in the community. It's a source of employment. It's providing opportunities for family members. It's creating a great product and or service. So when you look at all of that has become and grown through time and really has kind of amalgamated to define an individual, sometimes the last thing that they want to do is change that identity, change that relationship, because they're unsure of the future. And so identity, I think, is number one. I think number two is the fact that a lot of individuals really don't know what their future looks like. What I share with business owners is that it's hard to leave what you're doing until you know where you're going. And so you need to define the end game before you really start the beginning of the game in terms of defining and how your relationship would change with the business. So it's just part of a process. It's a mental transformation that I believe occurs with business owners as they begin to evaluate their options and then begin to define their life post-transition. So it's easy to procrastinate because this uncertainty, this fear of change, and how it might impact their relationships, their family, their employees, and their community. So there's a lot of interrelated factors that come into that decision.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that I found when working with clients, so for instance, in my area of expertise, documenting processes and procedures, I know what the obstacles are, right? I know what people don't do it. I know why they procrastinate. I know what they're going to be they will run into when they start on the process. And I really believe that it is important to identify, just like you identified it right now, in order to overcome it, right? It's like if we take an analogy from working out, so we know that maybe in the beginning you're going to be super enthusiastic about it, right? But then you're going to get into obstacles, you're going to hurt, you're going to not really like waking up in the morning. Maybe you started in the fall and now it's winter and it's so cold and you don't want to get out of the house to go to the gym. We're going to have all those obstacles, just to use a completely an analogy from a completely different field. But once you recognize it, if somebody says to you, okay, Don, this is what you're going to run into, 1, 2, 3, 4, those are the obstacles, so this is why this is going to happen. Then when it happens, you think, oh yeah, this is what it is, right? So our listeners are listening right now and they go, yeah, that makes sense. It's the identity, it's the end goal, it's that. So what do you recommend to your clients, like how to actually overcome that, how to actually start doing something about it?
Well, I think one thing, just like back to your exercise analogy, is there's a reason why you exercise, and you look at the tangible benefits that will come out of that pain and that sacrifice that you go through. And so with business owners, a lot of times it's helping them to understand the benefits of the change and what that means to them. So you have to have an end goal in mind in terms of a change that is beneficial for those individuals around you, but also for the business owner themselves. They're typically dealing with issues, things that they don't like. For example, running the day-to-day of the business, they become tired, they become somewhat overwhelmed with the operations, the complexity that comes with it. And so the fun has been taken out of the business and they're looking for something better, but they don't know what the better is. So the first step is to define what that future looks like and how that might improve the quality of their life, the quality of their relationships, maybe even tapping into opportunities and maximizing the relationship that they have with their spouse or their children or their friend. So getting them from the here and now to what the potential future, idealistic world might look like, and it's part of a dream, part of a vision, and part of an execution plan to realize that dream and vision.
So you're really painting the big picture.
Absolutely. And also I think it involves is making it real and making it possible. Sometimes an individual will procrastinate in addressing a problem because, number one, they're not sure how to address the problem. But number two, they don't believe it's solvable. And with an experienced, talented advisor that has insights that are looking at the situation from multiple angles, multiple perspectives, in coming to the table with options and potential ABC options, as opposed to, sometimes they'll go to business owners and said, sometimes they lack the ability to make a decision because they say, well, what would you like to do with your life? And it's an essay, as opposed to come to them and say, would you like A, B, and C? And then let's evaluate each option and compare the advantages and disadvantages of each option and boil it down to a multiple choice. Then it's an easier decision to make if you have choices.
100%. I agree. So let's talk about perhaps those choices, but also the biggest mistakes let's start with the biggest mistakes that you see that business owners make in terms of planning, because I think that will lead us into the options.
Yeah, I think some of the most common ones, especially in the areas of business transition, succession, or even as far as estate tax planning, or even maybe personal financial planning, is relying on one individual to help them with that plan. Because what it's important to understand is that an attorney, an accountant, a financial advisor, an insurance advisor, all have their own areas of expertise. They have their areas of specialization. They have their training and development. It's all very specialized. An attorney is probably very good at handling the legal aspects of a plan. An accountant, because of the complexities related to the tax rules, has to be very detailed, very in-depth in those particular planning strategies. The financial advisors may be more motivated when you look at their income sources by managing investments. Insurance people want to maybe promote products and continue to deliver service. But the mistake that many business owners make is relying on one individual to make that choice. So what I have found, it does take a village, it does take a team, and it takes a very integrated, comprehensive approach to look at the interrelated and what I call competing objectives. You have family issues, you have business issues, you have personal financial issues, you even have mental relationship or considerations related to that relationship. So it's important to integrate all of those components into that, because each choice has what I call competing objectives and trade-off. So it's important to walk through that process and help individuals understand, here are the choices, here are the trade-offs, let's design a strategy, and then let's use and work with the appropriate individuals at the right time to maximize the efficiency, tap into their skills and capabilities, and not do this in a silo, but do this in an aggregate. So that's one of the biggest mistakes I see business owners take, is thinking their attorney or their accountant can handle it all. In the reality, you're going to miss aspects that are outside of their purview. I think the number two is the one that we talked about, is procrastination. Individuals that just choose to delay, and I guarantee you in 99% of the cases, the problems don't get any easier. They get worse. They get more challenging. They get more complicated. So the sooner an individual can begin to create the path for their ultimate vision and their destination, and build it over a period of time by working closely with the various stakeholders involved, that individuals that will be impacted by this transition or by this plan, integrated them and having the trust and faith and confidence that it's going to be a balance between those objectives, and there's going to be trade-offs. So we make decisions with those trade-offs in mind, so we're making an informed decision about the long-term future.
Absolutely. I agree. So that's definitely very, I can see that there's two very common mistakes. So let's talk about the first one, because we talked about procrastination. So it does, it comes to, it basically brings a good point in terms of choosing your trusted advisors, right? And sometimes the not knowing who to choose, or should I ask my attorney, or should I ask my CPA, or should I ask my financial advisor, can also lead to that basically paralysis, that when you don't do anything because you just can't move and you don't know who to ask, or maybe you got an advice from one, but it's not a complete advice. I know that one of the things that you proud yourself for is really working together really well with other professionals in order to create that holistic approach, creating that it really, it really takes a village, right? So tell us more about that. Like, how do you approach that? And what do you find that is successful that business owners should look for in terms of, like, they're listening to us right now? What advice would you give them in order for them to really create that village of trusted advisors that are going to get them to where they need to be?
Yeah, fantastic question. It's as simple as being collaborative. And what I mean by that is being a team player and understanding that everybody has their lane. So it's important. The first step is to understand the individual, respective attorney, accountant, financial advisor, insurance person, you name it, is understand their background, their skills and experience. What do they bring to the table? And then as a team is begin to define role. The role of the relationships of the individual. How could we tap into their formal education, their training, and their experience, and their service delivery, what it is that they provide to clients. So me, as typically, not always, but being the quarterback of the planning process, my first step is to understand the advisors, and then let's talk collaboratively what's going on in the client situation, what are the problems, what are the issues, what are the goals, what are the objectives, what are the family dynamics, what's the financial situation, what's the legal situation, what's working, what's not working. So it's basically defining scope and direction. So based on that, we define roles, relationships, and then work collaboratively as a team to work with the client, figure out our communication strategy, who does what when, who's responsible for what, how did that individual relate with the client? Do we have strong relationships? Do we have distant relationships? So it's more of a kind of peeling back the onion and understanding what the arrangement is, and then moving forward collectively, but keeping the communication channels open, not being territorial, have humility, and bring that into the case. That oftentimes I can see where certain advisors are not team players. They believe they bring all of the solutions to the table. In my experience, that's naive and it's problematic, and it's really unjust for the client because we're dealing with this in a very overly simplistic manner. So it's it's just a lot of discussions and exploration and discovery.
Absolutely. So what advice, my question, I was going to ask you, like, what would make a good trusted advisor? But I think you just answered it. All those qualities, right? So what would you recommend to a business owner that is listening to us right now and they're thinking, yeah, I do need those professionals in my life, right? But I don't know how to find them. I don't know how to vet them. What will be some of the advice that you will give them in order for them to actually be able to decide whether the people that they're working with are really working for them, with them, if it's really the right fit? Like, what would you recommend that they do?
Well, first is always relying on your network, relying on your trusted friends and advisors that you currently work with, who has a reputation, to discover who in the marketplace has a reputation for being reliable, for being competent, for being fair, for being even fair with their costing or their fee structures. But then also, I think the key is making sure that you have the right advisor doing the right task. So by example, I have too many clients that say, okay, yeah, my attorney, they're a great estate tax planning attorney. They also handle mergers and acquisitions. They're involved in litigation. They also do family and divorce work. And I'm thinking, well, these are all very different disciplines. So we need to find in the individual, if we're doing estate tax planning, let's work with an attorney that spends the lion's share of their time in estate tax planning. Or if I'm going to help sell a business, I want to make sure I have a seasoned mergers and acquisition transaction lawyer. If I'm working with accountants, what kind of accounting work do they do? And understand by working in an accounting organization, there's a lot of specialization. You might have people that specialize in real estate, other people that might specialize in manufacturing, other people that do just assurance work. They might have a difference of tax. Sometimes CPAs do just C corporations, et cetera. So you see a lot of specialization. So it's very important to understand the core competencies of the advisors and where they spend the majority of their time, and even look to their clients and see if their clients have similar characteristics in terms of business size, complexity, family arrangement, to see that in essence, they can bring some wisdom and knowledge to the table that are just more than institutional.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Yesterday, I was talking to a client where they're starting a new business that has an international aspect to it. And I asked them, we discussed, their professionals that are helping them with their current business. They have to be different than the professionals that are going to help them in the new business because of that added complexity. There has to be that experience there. I agree with you. Do you have any stories to tell us where you actually helped a client or a client that, benefited from planning, or they didn't have planning and what happened? It's always good to illustrate it with some kind of an example.
Yeah, that's a great question, Addie. And I think about it from the standpoint of that the one mistake, and this will parlay into the client example, and it's a real life client example I'm working on currently. But where the individual, they made the mistake thinking that we have good attorneys, we have good accountants, we have financial advisors, we have a cadre of very talented individuals. So therefore, all the planning must be done. So you think walking into it, oh, there's just nothing to be done here and things are great. Well, when we get into it, one of our first steps is to perform an assessment. Let's take a look at personal, business, and estate goals. Let's understand the family dynamics. Let's understand the existing agreement, how the estate works, how their insurance is structured, what kind of planning that they've done overall, what's their tax situation, what's their corporation, etc. So it's very in-depth and very comprehensive. So in that particular situation, when we started getting into the arrangement, first thing I looked at the shareholders agreement. Well, the shareholders agreement had provisions in it that would be very problematic from an income tax standpoint based on how they valued the stock under this formula. So I said, well, help me understand, why did your attorney draft it this way? What was the understanding or what was the intent? Well, they were not aware of it. Well, we found that the agreement actually was very problematic and flawed in its essence. And then also they had been transferring stock. There's two daughters in the business and one son outside the business, and they have a bunch of commercial real estate, probably personal net worth over $50 million. So you're thinking that they're going to have very high quality advisors. Well, their strategy through their attorney was to transfer all the stock in the company equally to the children, active and inactive, and all the commercial real estate equally across the board. Wow. Well, for one, the children don't get along. Children have very different life goals. Two of the daughters want to operate the business. The son would love to be in real estate, and he has the passion for real estate, has an aptitude for it. So I said, why would then we transfer all the company ownership to all the three individuals, in essence, force them to be in business with each other, where they don't necessarily see eye to eye. They have completely different long-range objectives. And so what we're trying to do is undo what they did and transfer and reallocate the ownership to the right people at the right time, so we don't set them up for a future buyout. Similar situation where we get into it, the mom and dad are sitting with a very high personal net worth. They're in their late 70s, and they said, well, we're done gifting. And I said, are you aware of the state and federal inheritance tax liability, and what is your plan? And they said, well, we felt we've given enough. And I said, well, how much do you need to realize? How much do you need to keep in your estate for your financial security? They have no idea. So they're sitting with a $10 million plus inheritance tax liability with no liquidity to pay it. Insurance is structured wrong. And so they're not making lifetime transfers, and mom and dad are very charitable inclined. I said, why would we wait till we passed away and take advantage of these charitable interests? Wouldn't you like to see the impact with the charities that you love and admire? So now we're putting in place a charitable transition strategy that is integrated with the buyout and putting the right assets with the right children. So all of this and all the advisors are now on reuniting the advisors and actually replacing several advisors because nobody was paying attention and nobody was looking at this in aggregate and really trying to take a look at what the situation should look like 10, 20 years downstream. So it's just classic. There's a lot going on.
Absolutely. It is a great illustration of definitely why you need to have the right trusted advisors. And it's obviously, Don, you have the experience, you know what you're talking about, and you were there. What I know about you is that you have the best in mind for the client. That is definitely, that's what you want to accomplish. And that was one of the stories that illustrates this, right? So, if our listeners are listening right now and they go, yeah, we need planning. We don't have, just be honest with yourself. Do you have estate planning? Do you have succession planning? Do you have financial planning? The answer is no. How can they reach out to you, Don?
Easy. You can go to perkinsaccounting.com. I'm listed there. You look under my LinkedIn profile. It's Don Bielen, Bielen, LinkedIn. Look me up, easy to find. So either that or even a Google search. I'm relatively easy to find. And so I'd welcome the opportunity to speak with anybody.
Absolutely, because we need the planning, right? This is like an integral part of it's our investment, in life investment in our businesses. So we do need to make sure that there is continuity and legacy and that it's all protected and done right.
Absolutely. And one thing to add, the approach that I've taken is making sure that I'm not involved in the situation unless I can add significant value. And if I can, I'll be the first to tell the individual. So it's important to get a third-party perspective and opinion based on their planning and making sure it is integrated, as opposed to finding out later when things unravel or relationships are impacted or the business is impacted. So we invest a lot of time on the front end to identify where we add value, make it abundantly clear how we coordinate and integrate our thoughts and our ideas and our strategy with the other advisors, and bringing value, because my business depends on the work and the results that I generate from my work with my clients. And thank goodness I have fantastic relationships and great feedback from our clients, and which has continued to perpetuate the business. That's why I've been doing this for well over 25 years, and it's become self-sustaining.
Absolutely. Well, Don, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast and for the wealth of information and advice. And I'm sure our listeners, definitely gained from it and got them, if they don't have a plan or if they need to relook at their plan, that they got them thinking about it, that this is something that definitely has to be done. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, Addie. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity. And I'd love to see if I can help anybody else out. So much appreciated.
Great. Okay, fantastic, Don. It was great.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.